A key concern in political economy is the extent to which politicians may subvert government institutions to reward their voters and supporters. One form this patronage can take is providing constituents with preferential access to public utilities. In many countries, public goods such as electricity and water are state-owned and are shrouded in opaque bureaucracies that make them vulnerable to manipulation. But it can be difficult to isolate evidence of such corruption and, more importantly, quantify its social cost. This paper tackles both issues and presents causal evidence on corruption in the Indian electricity sector. Electricity providers in India are state-owned and managed by independent regulators, but distributors in many states have faced mounting losses for several years, to the point where the sector's bailout has been virtually systematized under a central government program. These losses may provide cover for politicians aiming to exploit the sector, which can be politically advantageous as electricity supply is a consistently important issue for voters. To shed light on corruption in this setting, the author leverages three key ingredients. First, she uses administrative billing records to measure reported electricity consumption. These data are sourced from the electricity utility of West Bengal, a large state with a population of 72 million. Second, she uses satellite nighttime lights data to measure actual electricity consumption. The extent to which actual and reported consumption differ serves as a proxy for potential manipulation. And finally, to estimate causal effects, the paper focuses on close local elections in which assembly members who are ultimately aligned with the state's ruling party narrowly win. The idea is that because local elections are competitive and unpredictable, in tight races, the probability that one candidate versus another wins is close to randomly determined. So we can compare assemblies in which the ruling party's candidate barely wins to those in which they barely lose to estimate the causal effect of belonging to an assembly that is aligned with the party in power. These figures show that assemblies on either side of the cutoff are statistically indistinguishable along multiple dimensions, which is consistent with the idea that the outcomes of these tight races are close to random. The paper's first key finding is that shortly after an election, actual electricity consumption increases in regions narrowly aligned with the ruling party. Light density is discontinuously higher by 0.53 log points in assemblies where the ruling party barely won relative to those where they barely lost, and this increase in consumption aligns precisely with the post-election period. At the same time, the administrative data reveal discontinuously lower levels of billed consumption in the same regions. This discrepancy suggests that politicians favor their constituencies by underreporting electricity consumption, even as those constituents consume higher actual amounts. The magnitude of this underreporting is large. Favored account holders pay for only 60% of their billable consumption. To investigate how this manipulation takes place, this figure shows the distribution of reported electricity consumption as recorded in the billing data. It is immediately apparent that there are peaks at round numbers such as 20, 30, or 40 kilowatt hours, and, tellingly, the probability that billed consumption is neatly rounded off to a multiple of 10 is systematically higher in assemblies represented by the ruling party. This points to politically motivated data manipulation at local billing centers, and this figure shows that the degree of manipulation grows over time before falling on the eve of the next election. Importantly, these patterns are not specific to West Bengal. While the author's billing data do not cover other states, the satellite nighttime lights data are available countrywide, and they reveal a strikingly similar dynamic. There are no detectable discontinuities in electricity consumption before an election, but immediately after, consumption is 0.48 log points higher in assemblies narrowly aligned with the ruling party. These discontinuities are more pronounced in states with higher distribution revenue losses, those with multiple rather than single distributors, and those with utilities assigned the worst ratings from the Ministry of Power. What is the social cost of this corruption? From a pure efficiency point of view, there would be no impact on overall welfare if the loss in profit for electricity providers were exactly matched by an increase in consumer surplus for voters who benefit from cheaper electricity. However, using her results, the author estimates a loss of $3.5 billion in producer profits in West Bengal in a single electoral term, balanced against a gain in consumer surplus of only $2.7 billion, which nets out to an overall loss of $0.9 billion. This is a deadweight loss large enough to power almost 91 million additional rural households across the country, and these losses could well be larger if scaled to include other states vulnerable to the same manipulation. It is also worth emphasizing that losses in electricity producer profits can have far-ranging consequences. By hurting the ability of utilities to meet electricity demand, they result in unreliable supply for all consumers, and by necessitating government bailouts, they may divert funds from developmental budgets, which can be detrimental to poorer segments of society. As such, designing effective policies to combat corruption can have first-order impacts on inequality and economic development. To read more on this topic, you can check out the paper's references to other related work. This includes research on the Indian electricity sector, as well as a broader set of papers studying patronage and corruption and their attendant welfare costs.